Okay guys, so check it out. We have our little tow truck application here, except now in our list we have these nice little link buttons, template buttons that we have put in, and you can see we've got a little bit more styling too. In our headers there, we've sort of cleaned up the headers so that they look more like what you might expect to see in an application like this. And also we've removed some grid lines and we've changed our styling that we used for Bootstrap. I've added one more setting and that has made the table more interactive. I'm your host, Sean MacKenzie. Thank you for joining me once again on my channel on data engineering. In this episode, we go back to our WebForms playlist and we're going to take a look at the mighty GridView control. Now we've already loaded a GridView in our project so far. Make sure to go back and check out those episodes if you have not checked those out yet. And the GridView control is very, very powerful and flexible, and it is one of the tools that you'll use in your web applications for all kinds of different things. And today we're going to do a little bit more styling, and we're also going to introduce the template button and things like that. And we're going to talk a little bit about the RowCommand, which is a very powerful feature of GridViews that we're going to introduce in the next episode in this series. Let's get to it. Interested in more cool topics like these? Make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. Okay guys, so we're starting right where we left off last time. This is our ASP.NET application with Visual Basic, and here are the ASPX pages that we have been working on in the Solution Explorer. And if I double click on the default.aspx, that is the page that we've been working on. And you can see if I scroll down here, these are all of the objects that we created in our previous episodes. Make sure to check out the playlist for this. If you have not started at the beginning, you might want to do that. And today we're going to continue on, and we can hit the view and then view code, or we can use F7 to go to the code behind for this page. You can see it starts in another tab on the top left there. So that is the code we've been working with. It is a single page application so far with some code behind, and what we're going to do today is we're going to work a little bit on that grid view control that we stuck in there in a previous episode. Now if I hit F5, I can open the application as it stands right now. You can see it's running under localhost, and that is our local computer, and you can see this is what it looks like before we've done any work to it. And so we've got our select button there, which is a sort of hyperlink style button, and you can see our filtering works just as intended. But you can see at the top there, those headers aren't very clean. And also that select button on the left hand side could probably have a different look and feel, and so those are a couple of things that we're going to look at today. You can see up here, that's our tow address. It's all stuck together in one word, and we've got our contact phone and called in, and those are not sort of great headers. And there's our select button. It's kind of a hyperlink style button, which is really old school. And what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at some of those things, including the grid lines. I think we're going to get rid of those grid lines so that we have a nice presentation of the table. And we're also going to talk about future functionality, which is going to be in the RowCommand of the grid view. That's going to be a future episode, but I'm going to introduce that at the end of today's episode. Okay, so going back to our markup sheet here, our source sheet, you can see we've got our ASP update panel that we worked on inside of our content page. We worked on our triggers before, and we have some divs there, including the Jumbotron, which is that sort of big header, and we're also going to squish that down in a future episode. I think it's a little bit too big, and it's sort of obscuring our list and making it not as usable, but it does give us the username in a nice little banner there. And so we've got our filters at the top. That's sort of what we're scrolling through right now. You can see those are all just using a little bit of markup, and then we've got right in the middle of our page, we've got this grid view control, which doesn't really have a lot of arguments on it. It sort of just has, a couple arguments, and I did that on purpose in the beginning so that we could get a list very quickly and use the automatic features of the grid view, and that's when we did that data bind in VB. You might remember we created a data table from a select out of the database, and then we just said data bind, and the grid view will just sort of auto output that onto the page. And you can see there we've got a data key name of tow ID, so that each row knows which record it is. But the grid view is actually much more powerful, and can have a lot more options and sort of fine tuning that can be done. And so we're going to take a look at that today. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to change our long sort of line there that we had. So you can do this after each of the arguments once you put them in, and you can sort of indent it, and it spreads it onto multiple lines so that it's easier to read. And there's the beginning and end of our grid view. So this is the starting tag of our grid view here, and this is the ending tag of our grid view at the bottom. And so you can see we've got the CSS table set as table, we've got run at server, auto generate select button, and all kinds of things like that. And so one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to delete that auto generate select button, and because we're going to put our own select button in, and we're going to use what's called a template button. But before we use our template button, we are going to set up our columns manually inside of our grid view. And so that means we're gonna indent our code. It'll automatically do it in the IDE for you. And once we put the column start and end tags there, you'll see that now we can put in the ASP template field tag, and that's going to also give us a start and end tag. And then inside of that we'll get an item template, start and end tag, and then once we're inside of that we can put in a link button, and that's going to allow us to put some other kind of object in there for our select button, so that we can have something that's nice to display, but it's going to use the native sort of select command, and we're going to put that in right here. We're going to say ID equals CMD select. That's just like in your Microsoft Access. If you've been programming that, you've seen my other videos where I create a button on a form, and then we're going to say command name is equal to select in this case. And so that's going to take over the select behavior of the select button in the grid view. And in a future episode we're going to create other commands that we create our own custom commands for, and that's going to be under the RowCommand feature, but we're not going to use that today. We're just going to take over the select. All we want it to do is trigger that select event, which is the selected index changed on our grid view in our code behind. So there we go, we've got our start and end tag for our templates, and inside of that we have our link button. And once we've got the link button set up, the last thing that we'll put in there is we're going to put in a glyph icon, which is a graphic that has it's a graphic set that has a lot of different kinds of images, like file and play and pause and all those kinds of things. And so we're going to use glyph icon dash wrench. That was the one that I found on the Bootstrap site for 3.4.1, which is an older one, but a lot of you guys might still have this version if you're building WebForms before 2022, if you have an older version of it. If you have the latest version, then you'll have the version 5, which is the latest, and uses vector graphics, so you'll have to get the icon from there. But there we go, there's our span class, which has the glyph icon in it, and I'm just going to format that a little bit so that our link button has a start and end tag, and inside of that we've got our span, which has a nice little wrench glyph in it, and we are good to go there for the first column. And so that column was a big nasty column. In order to get all of that stuff in there, that you could see that took up about 10 lines of code or so, or maybe a little bit less. But the rest of the columns are very, very easy. And so when we're doing a grid view and we're actually specifying the columns from the data table that we created, and we did that in a previous episode where we just basically did a select from the database, and then the resulting data table had columns in it which had the column names from the database. And so when we bound that data table to this grid view got the column names from the data table. And so here we go, we've got our tow ID, and we've got a bound field for vehicle, we've got a bound field for the rest of the fields as they are in the data table. Now this is where you can pick and choose different fields. So when I did the automatic sort of loading of the grid view, that meant that all of the fields in the data table were used regardless of what they looked like or whatever. And if you decide to specify your fields and you remove that the automatic columns, then you can pick and choose which fields you want in the grid view, and that is very, very helpful. So you might have some other columns in your data table that are they're sort of helpful columns for calculations and things, but you don't want to show those to the user. Well, this is where you would specify a design for your grid view, as opposed to just saying automatic grid view, fill it. And so there's our fields. We've got tow ID, vehicle, tow address, contact phone called in and completed. Now I have our production system open in another browser window here. Now this is the one that has been published out into Azure. It's out in the wild. This is what we published last time. There's the the address for it, and you can see these headers here don't really look that great. We'd like to change that if we can, so that they don't they have spaces where they need spaces and things like that, and that's where we set our headers. And so I'll hit save there, and so we can do the headers in the bound field as well. It's an option, you don't have to put it in, but it can be very nice for display purposes and things like that. And so this is where we can set our header text. So we just put in the text there. It'll auto capitalize that for you. And then maybe I only want to put in ID in the header, but the field name is called tow ID. And maybe I only want to have address for the tow address. I don't want to actually say this is the tow address. That's kind of redundant. Not redundant as a field name because it's more descriptive, but for a header name, it doesn't really look that great. And so maybe the same thing for phone. I could remove contact from that, and for called in I might want to put in a space so that looks nicer. After that, the next thing that you'll do is for the remainder of the fields, you can just put in their field name for the header text, and that will be the same as what they had before. And so then you'll have a full sort of set of header text along with the data fields. The next thing that we need to do is we need to specify one more option in our grid view itself, and that is going to be to not generate those columns that we just created definitions for. Otherwise you'll get a double set of columns. So if you see a double set of columns, all the ones that you specified and then the same thing again, that means that you just need to set this auto generate columns equals false, and that's going to make it so that it doesn't make its own columns. It will only make the columns that you specified, and so we can go from there. So we hit F5, here we go. This is our page coming up. Let's see what we got here. So I did auto generate columns as false. There we go. So there is our template button. It's looking pretty good. and it's got a little wrench in it. You can pick from that big list of icons. There's all kinds of icons that you can use that are available in this version of Bootstrap. Our select is working, so that means that's the select event. When we click on it, that something happens. That's firing the selected index changed event that is on the grid view, which is awesome. And so that makes it nice and easy. Our filter works just the way that we were working with it before. And so now it looks a bit nicer. That is thanks in no small part to Bootstrap, who made this glyph available to us. And now there are vector graphics in the latest version, so you need to make sure you're in the right one. I did show you how to check your version in your project in the CSS file, and it will not be this latest version. If you have the most upgraded Visual Studio 2022, you will have this 5.1, I believe it is, and you can find the vector graphics inside of this version of Bootstrap. If I go back and I look at an older version, the one that was used with many of the WebForms applications is the 3.4.1, and that one has a nice, easy to use glyph icon set, which is a little easier to use than the newer SVG graphics. I can do an episode on that one as well. If you guys want to see that, make sure to put a comment in the comment section below. But this is the 3.4.1 version, and you can see all those icons are available for us to use, and that is super cool. And you can get lost in just trying to find all these different neat little things for your application. Okay, let's make a couple more little changes here just for look and feel. So let's go ahead and we can set our CSS class. Now we have it set as the table class, and we did that in our last episode where we introduced the CSS part of our project. But you can extend a lot of the classes, and we can use sort of an extension here called table hover, which gives a nice little hover over action over all the rows, and we can set the grid lines equal to none, and that's going to remove those old style black lines around our table that looked like it was from 1999. And so there we go. We've got our command button in there. We've got our table hover and everything going there. So let's hit go on the toolbar there and see what we got. So we can open up our app here. We can scroll down, and now you can see that's a little bit nicer. Now we've got a nice hover over kind of action on our rows, and also on our link button, which is a nice little graphic there that will resize properly if people resize their browsers or scale them up and things like that for readability. But it looks good. It works the way we intended with the wrench on there and the filter, and that's exactly what we want to see there. And in the next episode, we're going to take a look at the RowCommand feature, which is part of the grid view. And the RowCommand allows us to put other buttons on each row so that we can do all kinds of different things, and we can make our own custom commands for it. And so that's really awesome. The next thing we can do here today, though, we are done with our new features, and so we will go ahead and publish our application out into Azure, so it's available to our users from anywhere on the internet, so long as they log in through Windows authentication here. And in order to do that, we just go build and then publish, and then we get the publish button available. Make sure you choose the right Azure app service and the right profile at the top there, and it'll sort of grind away there as it publishes your application out into Azure. And once it is done, it will fire up another browser window to try and log into that, and that might take a second because each time that it reinstalls or updates, makes changes to your application, then I don't know, but I think the server has to recompile it and all that kind of stuff, so it doesn't fire up as fast as the first time. But there we go. We've got our application set up and ready to go, and this is the multi-factor authentication you need to get into it, and you can invite other users to collaborate as long as they have a Microsoft ID. We covered the security in a previous episode. Make sure to go back and check out the earlier episodes where we first set up this application. And so there we go, we've logged in. The application fires up, and there we go. We have our toe-operations.azurewebsites.net, and there is our nice little grid view with the hover over and our link button. And if I scroll through this, you can see it operates just how we wanted it to. We can click on each of the items in the list, and they will show up in our edit controls on the right hand side. If I use the filter, it works just as I would like, and our headers have all been updated to look a little bit more user friendly with the bolding and everything there. That's all sort of like the default settings. You can change those, by the way. Make sure to stay tuned for my next episode where I demonstrate the RowCommand feature. Looking for more resources for your project? Make sure to check out the additional links in the description.